Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you guys for joining us for the second episode of the Rough Draft Sportscast. I am your host, Damon Kennedy. Now, with today being Memorial Day, I did just want to take a second to thank all of our brave men and women in uniform. We can't thank you enough for all of the sacrifices that you make for our country and keeping us safe on a daily basis. So I do just want to tip my cap to you guys because I don't feel like that you get enough recognition. Now, on a day like today here in Orlando when it's rainy, gloomy, stormy, and nasty outside, I hope you guys are still finding a way to have fun. I hope those barbecues are still going. I hope you guys are headed to the beach. No matter where you are in the country, I hope you all are enjoying yourselves to the fullest. But let's go ahead and get into this second edition of the Rough Draft Sportscast. Now, in this second edition, guys, we're going to talk about insurance. Yes, insurance. So, what do I mean by insurance? We all know about it. We all have it in some form or fashion, whether it's home insurance, car insurance, renter's insurance, going out to get that generator so the power doesn't go out on you in a hurricane. But really, we're talking about insurance on a level of the NFL draft. I believe that the whole idea of drafting for the future, of just in case something happens, has really become a taboo thing in the NFL draft. When you look at the way that the draft has really set itself up in the last couple of years, it's a lot of instant gratification, especially when it comes down to these power rankings as far as the draft is over. When you talk to you about your Mel Kipers and your Todd McShays of the world, and they want to do that instant analysis of what the draft strength is and which team really made themselves better. But I really think that you need to keep an eye on the teams that actually made an effort to draft for the future. Not necessarily what is going to get them the most amount of wins in this upcoming season in 2020, but really keeping an eye on the future for certain positions of need and certain things that they might see that might not be a strength for themselves in the future, and maybe not necessarily the immediate future, but we could be looking at even possibly 2 years down the line. So I think that there's 4 teams out there that I really want to dig into today that I think did an excellent job of really looking at this draft and forecasting themselves for what they want to make this team to be in the future. Because right now, the draft has taken on an emphasis of being in that top 5 power rankings in the post-draft and making the biggest splash and making sure that your team is in the headlines, because a lot of these things are all directly intertwined as to job security. You know, you have GMs that are scared to make that wrong pick that might not be sexy in the eyes of the pundits because it could cause them to lose a job. You have coaches who might be scared to go in a certain direction as far as a player of need because it might hamper some things that they have going on with some veteran players on their team, and they're afraid to lose their job. And then you have owners who have to take this all-encompassing with, if these picks aren't sexy enough, if they're not gathering enough national attention, if you're not getting that media coverage, you're not selling those jerseys, you're not selling those tickets for your season already right away. You know, you're going to have to do some extra legwork if you're not making those sexy picks to ensure your fan base that you are doing everything possible in order to bring a Super Bowl winner to your city. So that's what we're really going to dig into here, is we're going to look at those teams that weren't afraid to actually look for the future. And yes, some of these picks were sexy, but they were very smart because they really put that franchise in position to sustain wins and to sustain a winning culture and a winning franchise for years to come. I think the first team that we're really going to have to dig into is, surprise, surprise, the Green Bay Packers. Now, once again, for those of you who aren't familiar with me, I am born and raised in the state of Wisconsin. And before you ask, no, I am not a Packers fan. I am a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan. But that does not mean that I don't keep track of what's going on in my home state. So, these Green Bay Packers, all right, they made one of the more perplexing picks in the first round in the eyes of a lot of fans by taking Jordan Love at number 26. I am not one of those people who were perplexed by that pick at number 26. If you look at the history of the Green Bay Packers, this is pretty much right on par with what they've done over the last 20 years. It's pretty much come full circle, so I don't really understand how Packer fans are upset or even surprised by this. Yes, there were a lot of wide receivers that they could have taken in that first round. There was a lot of different ways that they could have gone. But honestly, if you look at this thing objectively from an outside fan perspective, that Jordan Love pick was very, very smart. So if you look at how it's come full circle, in 2004, Brett Favre was age 35. He had thrown for 4,088 yards, 30 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, had a 92.4 rating. They went 10-6 that year. They lost to a very good Minnesota Vikings team that was led by Dante Culpepper, Randy Moss, and those boys out there. So they were really doing their thing that year, but they went 10-6 that year, and they lost in that wild card. But that was not a good game for Brett Favre in the grand scheme of things. He was picked off 4 times. He ended up only having 1 touchdown pass in that entire game. They only scored 17 points. They ended up losing 30-17 in that game. So I think a lot of Packer fans right then were kind of thinking, oh man, like what's going on with this, with this offense? We were rolling pretty well, because at that time their number 1 wide receiver was Javon Walker. He ended up having 89 catches that year for 1,382 yards, and he had 12 touchdowns. So he actually had a really, really good season. So overall, the Packers weren't bad, but just they could not put it together in that playoff game. Now, what I think is important to remember is if you were not a Packer fan, or even a resident of Wisconsin at that time, there were a lot of things going on with the Packers organization and with Brett Favre that were very, very middle of the road at the time. During, I'd say, from 02 to 04, Brett Favre was waffling a little bit on how much longer he really wanted to play with the Green Bay Packers. He had given his body to the absolute fullest for that organization by that point. And he had never missed a start, never missed a game, never missed a start. So he was definitely an Iron Man, and he was a stalwart for that Green Bay Packers organization. But the time was starting to tick on Brett a little bit, and he was kind of making it known that he wasn't sure how much longer he was going to be able to keep it up in Green Bay. So that next offseason, Ted Thompson, who was the GM of the Packers for a long time at that time, made the decision to start looking at a possible replacement for Brett Favre. And lo and behold, when you look at that 2005 draft, Aaron Rodgers was someone who was considered as a possible top 10 pick, and he began to slide. So as they got down into the 20s, the Green Bay Packers really had a decision to make at that time. Yes, they had Brett Favre. He was a future Hall of Famer. He was a perennial Pro Bowler. The man had never missed a start, had never missed a game, but he was also starting to give you some ideas that he didn't know how much longer he was going to go. So you got this kid sitting here in the green room who was considered a top 10 pick, who had been passed on by some other teams who could really use a quarterback at that time, namely San Francisco, who ended up going with Alex Smith at number 1 with, guess who was your quarterback coach then, Mike McCarthy, who ends up becoming, coincidentally, the coach of the Green Bay Packers in 2005. But anyway, so you've got Aaron Rodgers sitting in this green room, got his hair all flipped up with the gel and everything, and he's sitting there, he's looking nervous, and the Packers are actually using one of the best moments of clarity that they could have come up with at that time by taking a young Aaron Rodgers from Cal, knowing that Brett Favre still had approximately 3 years left on his contract. So in the grand scheme of things, when they drafted Aaron Rodgers, they did not think that he needed to touch the field right away. They knew that they had something in him that they could develop, that they could put behind Brett Favre, someone who was not going to miss a game, but they were going to make sure that if something happened, that they were going to be in a position to make sure that they had their quarterback of the future. Now, I remember that 2005 draft, and people were not happy with the Aaron Rodgers pick at first. They felt that there were other directions that they could have gone, especially considering that 2004 year they went 10-6, and then they were only able to put up 17 points against an upstart Vikings team. But a lot of people thought that there were other directions that the Packers could have gone. They thought they could have gone wide receiver. They thought that they could have gone out and got some defensive line help. There were a ton of ways that people thought that the Packers could have been molded in order to put some more things around Brett Favre so that he didn't have to do so much. But obviously the Packers knew something that we didn't know, because in 2005, Brett had one of his worst years. He threw for 3,881 yards, 20 touchdowns, 29 interceptions, and had a 70.9 rating. The Packers went 4-12 that year. Now, yes, they had a ton of injuries that year. They lost 3 different running backs. They lost their top wide receiver in Javon Walker. So their top wide receiver that year was Donald Driver. Now, he still had 86 catches, 1,221 yards, but he only had 5 touchdowns. It was a really, really rough season for the Packers. Now, no, Brett did not miss any games. He didn't miss any snaps, but it did start to put the writing on the wall a little bit as far as where the Packers were headed for the future. And people started to really realize that they were glad that they had this other quarterback in the wings. Now, he didn't touch the field, but they were glad to have him at that point. And lo and behold, he turns into one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, one of the most efficient quarterbacks to ever play the game. But at that time, there was a little bit of a transition after that 2005 season because Ray Sherman was fired, and then they brought in Mike McCarthy. And actually, when you got to the 2006 season, Brett's numbers started to go up just a little bit, but it was actually in the 2007 season that things really started to work out as far as the Brett Favre and Mike McCarthy relationship, because Brett ended up throwing for 4,155 yards, 28 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and then they made it to the conference championship game. But as we recall, that was the year of the Cinderella New York Giants. So when Brett Favre threw that last interception in that NFC championship game, when he kind of just threw it up, that ended up being Brett Favre's last pass as a Green Bay Packer. So, it was kind of poetic justice that Brett Favre's last pass ended up being, one of his circus tosses where he just threw it up. And, it was a 50-50 thing with Brett from time to time. He would throw it up. You didn't know who was going to come down with it. But that ended up being his last pass as a Green Bay Packer, was that interception that he threw against the New York Giants in that NFC Championship game with the Green Bay Packers. Because as we know, he went on to semi-retire, and then he went with the Jets because he wanted to force his way to the Vikings, which becomes a whole nother can of worms that we can talk about in another date. But that was really the end of the Brett Favre era, and the beginning of the Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy era was that 2008 season, which statistically was an okay season for Rodgers, but the team did not perform very well over the course of that first year of him starting. That 2008 season saw them go 6-10, and they ended up third in the NFC North. But as we know, he got much better, because 2010 is when they ended up going 10-6, and then they made that run as a wild card team to the Super Bowl. And they've been in the playoffs consistently after that every single year, with the exception of 2017 and 2018. But once again, we are now getting to that point where the last couple years of Aaron Rodgers' career, you've heard him say things to the effect of he sees himself on the back nine of his career, or he's starting to really put a cap on how much longer that he thinks he wants to play. We've seen this before. We've seen this, song and dance before with enthralled quarterbacks of the Green Bay Packers, where it gets to a point where they start to let the media know and they start to let the franchise know that they see the writing on the wall, that eventually they are going to hit that point where they know that they may not be able to do it on the level that they did before. When anytime a quarterback starts to talk about being able to see the twilight towards the end of their career, I think that you would be remiss if you did not start to do your due diligence to make sure that you have that ace in the hole, to make sure that you have someone down the line that is going to make sure that your franchise can continue to roll. So that is exactly what the Green Bay Packers began the process of. Because once again, we are going full circle. If you look at Aaron Rodgers' 2019 statistics at age 36, he threw for 4,002 yards, 26 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 95.4 rating. Those guys ended up going 13-3. They lost in the conference championship to the 49ers. Now, in that game, there were a lot of things that went wrong, and none of them were necessarily ones that you could place completely on Aaron, because, the man was running for his life. That 49ers pass rush is just something that is out of this world, and you could really start to see the separation in talent level between the 49ers and the Packers when it came to that game. But either way, that was not a good game for Aaron. They had a really, really tough one, and they ended up losing to the 49ers, who, as we know, went on to the Super Bowl, and then they ended up losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. But 2019, leading wide receiver for the 2019 year was Devontae Adams. He had 83 catches, 997 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, as we know, his season could have been statistically better because he did suffer a few injuries that became nagging for him, so he did miss a little bit of time. Your next leading receiver on that team was Aaron Jones, who's a running back who splits time, and he had 474 yards receiving. I think an interesting thing to note is the fact that the Packers were working with a brand new rookie head coach in Matt LaFleur, someone who has been regarded in certain circles as an offensive guru, as someone who thinks of things a little bit differently as far as the playbook and the utilization of running backs out of the backfield, and not so much relying on that one top flight wide receiver to get you over the hump. Which in theory sounds good, except for the fact that once again your second leading receiver was a running back with 474 yards. The rest of the Packers wide receivers do not instill any fear in a defense. Your Alan Lazards, your Geronimo Allisons, your Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I don't even know how to pronounce some of these guys' names. That's how much that they did not produce this last year. So you really would have thought that heading into this draft that wide receiver would have been number one on the Packers draft board. You really would have thought that shoring up that wide receiver room with an impact player would have really put the Packers over the edge when you look at the other powers that are in the NFC. But they obviously didn't think that way, because in the second round they ended up going with a little bit more of a bruising running back with A.J. Dillon. Now, he does have some capabilities to catch the ball out of the backfield, but we haven't really seen that in this scale yet. We don't know how he is going to really translate those skills to the NFL level. Now, in the third round, they took a tight end in Joseph DeGuara. Now, he is a little bit more of a blocking tight end. Now, I do know they have Jay Sternberger, who they seem to be excited about. They think that he is someone who can really make an impact in the downfield passing game. But I still just really don't see where the second set of wide receiver yards are going to come from as far as that group. But what it really comes down to is the fact that the Packers had the foresight enough to see that Aaron Rodgers knew the writing is on the wall. He sees the end of his career coming up, and the Packers do not want to be caught in that weird limbo where they do not have someone who has been training in their system, especially with a brand new coach. This is going to give them time to really groom Love to get him to a position where he can hit the ground running, much like Aaron Rodgers did. So once again, when it comes to the Packers draft, I know a lot of people didn't really understand the 26th pick being a quarterback, but I get it. Like, I really understand that the Packers have an eye on the future, and they realize that, one, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be able to play forever, and two, we don't know how much longer Aaron Rodgers really, really wants to play the game. He's got a lot of things going on in his personal life, and he always just seems to be a little bit aloof and a little bit on the outside of someone who really, really lives, eats, breathes, and sleeps the game like your Peyton Mannings and like your Drew Breeses. So it was very, very smart for the Packers to go ahead and make that move and get Jordan Love at 26 and make sure that your quarterback room is set so that when it is time for Aaron Rodgers to ride off into the sunset, off to the Hall of Fame, getting that yellow jacket, you're going to have somebody behind him who is at least well-versed in the system enough and has watched Aaron Rodgers prepare on a daily basis, so that you hope some of that rubs off and that you're able to continue this path that you have of replacing one great quarterback with another. So that is my take on the Green Bay Packers. Now, moving on to another team that I really feel like did their due diligence in making sure they keep an eye on the future and possibly the immediate future is the hated Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to start this right now by saying I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. I hate the Eagles. I'm going to call them the Sheagles, but I'm going to be respectful because I know that there are some Eagles fans that listen to this podcast. So, the Eagles, I got to say, man, I am very, very impressed with the fact that you guys turned around and took Jalen Hurts in the second round. I got to give you a round of applause on that because a lot of people were, Philly fans included, you guys know who you are. I watched a ton of YouTube videos of you guys sick. I'm talking about sick to your stomachs that you guys took Jalen Hurts in the second round. And my question is, why? Why you mad? If anything, you should be happy because your boy Carson Wentz has only finished 2 full seasons in his entire career, okay? And that was his rookie season, and that was this last season that just passed. So if you want to be mad at somebody, let's not be mad at Howie Roseman for taking Jalen Hurts in the second round, who was by far one of the better quarterbacks in this draft, who has put themselves a resume in front of them that has been worthy of a top pick. You should be mad at Carson Wentz, not Howie Roseman. Y'all should be mad at Carson Wentz at the fact that a thought of drafting a quarterback in the top 3 rounds was even something that would even cross their minds with all of the talent that was in this draft. Y'all need to be mad at Carson Wentz for not proving that he can play a full season for y'all. That's who you need to be mad at, not Howie Roseman. Y'all need to be mad at Carson Wentz. I mean, think about it. Y'all just gave this man a contract extension through the 2024 season at $128 million, with $107.9 of it fully guaranteed. That's $26 million a year on the hope, the sheer hope that this man will see 16 games. And even then, him seeing 16 games has not translated to you guys being successful. I mean, his rookie season, 16 games, he did 3,700 yards, 16 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Rookie year. All right, fine. The year that he went to the Pro Bowl and the Eagles won the Super Bowl, he did play 13 games. He went 11-2, but he didn't finish the season for you guys. So that Super Bowl ring was not really his. This last year, 2019, he played 16 games. He had a 9-7 record. Now, he threw for 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, had a 93 rating. But at the same time, you still, every single time that man dropped back, you didn't know how that play was going to end up. Every single time he took a hit, you did not know if he was going to get up. Every single game, you didn't know if he was going to finish it. And the crazy part is that after you guys drafted Jalen Hurts, you heard your coach saying that they were even going to think about exploring the idea of using multiple QBs in a game. What? Are you kidding me right now? This is the NFL. When is the last time that you knew of a dual quarterback system that actually worked? I'll give you a second, because this is going to take you a while. I had to dig in for this one. The last time that a multiple QB system worked, was actually successful, y'all, in the NFL, was 1949 to 1952 with the LA Rams using a dual QB system with Norm Van Brocklin and Bob Waterfield. They actually won the NFL title in 1951. Now, that was just something that had never been seen before, and coincidentally, has never been seen again. And the craziest part, too, about that 4 years that those guys put together with those 4 incredible seasons, first off, both of those guys went to the Hall of Fame. But they also had 3 different coaches over the course of that 4 seasons. So they obviously had some kind of crazy little tandem going on where they were able to make it work and they were actually successful at it. But that is the last time that a NFL team has utilized a dual quarterback system and it has actually been successful. Not something injury related where somebody had to come in and then the other quarterback comes back. No, I'm talking about switching off series, possibly switching off plays, being on the field at the same time. No, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So this is crazy that the Eagles gave Carson Wentz $108 million guaranteed and then turned around and drafted a quarterback in the second round because they want to be known as, quote, a quarterback factory. Stop it. Stop it. Let's just tell the truth here. You cannot trust Carson Wentz to finish a full season, so you realize the error in your ways after you gave that man all that money. You realize that he cannot be trusted to finish a full season. You're mad that you let Nick Foles go for what you let him go for, so you decided to get the next quarterback that you're going to need probably by week 6 in Jalen Hurts in the second round. So once again, Eagles fans, don't be mad at Howie Roseman. Be mad at Carson Wentz. That's all the time that I'm going to spend on this right here because it's self-explanatory. Carson Wentz does not finish the season for you. He cannot be trusted to finish the season for you. The Eagles were incredibly smart to go out and get Jalen Hurts in the second round. And mark my words, you will see Jalen Hurts get significant snaps in 2019 because eventually Carson Wentz will be injured. Now, Moving on to the next team that I think really did a great job in this draft and keeping an eye on the future, I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders. Surprise. I know it's a surprise to some people, but I'm actually going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders on this one. Now, they took 3 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds. That might seem like a weird thing to do, right? But it's not, honestly, if you think about it. A John Gruden system, all right? A John Gruden system is built on stretching the field and then getting over the top. The Raiders had nobody in their system last year that was able to get over the top. Their top wide receiver last year was a tight end. I'd like to thank that man for all the fantasy points that he got me. Darren Waller had over 1,000 yards, but he was your tight end. Your next leading receiver was Tyrell Williams, and he didn't even get 800 yards. So right there you see that the Raiders had an eye on the future. They were making sure that this roster is built up, and they were making sure that they were putting weapons on this offense because they actually had a pretty good offense last year. Now, last year they were built with the idea that they were going to have Antonio Brown. We all know how that turned out. There's no need to even think about that. But it was built with the idea that they were going to have a receiver that was going to be able to take the top off the defense. They didn't have that last year, so they suffered. So, insert fastest man alive, Henry Ruggs III from Alabama. Super duper smart. So they grabbed that man right away in the beginning of the first round. Someone that you cannot catch in a foot race. Tyreek Hill-esque. Someone that is going to make your safeties back off. Someone that you cannot play bump and run with because if you miss, he's gone. So Henry Ruggs right away was a very smart pick. It has John Gruden written all over it. It has the Raiders written all over it. So I'm loving that first pick that they went with Henry Ruggs. Now, the second pick that they had in the first round, number 19, the Damon Arnette pick. I don't really fully understand that one because I really feel like at that number 19 spot, the Raiders really could have gotten another quality player. I feel like Damon Arnette is somebody who could have been available later in the draft, possibly even second round, if you look at the way that the cornerbacks were coming off the market at that time. But I feel like at that 19 pick, I mean, you still had some really quality players on the board. You had an Isaiah Wilson from Georgia. There was the linebacker from Oklahoma, Kenneth Murray. There was the center from Michigan, Cesar Ruiz. There was a lot of different ways that the Raiders could have gone with that particular pick other than Damon Arnette. But I really feel like at that point is where I would have taken Jalen Hurts. I think that he really would have made a nice little addition to that Las Vegas Raiders quarterback room just in case you were not sold on Derek Carr after this year. Because where they are right now, they're basically relying on Derek Carr to get it done for them this year. And if it doesn't happen, they're relying on getting a high enough draft pick to dabble in this quarterback jackpot that is about to be happening in this next year. So I really feel like the Raiders kind of dropped the ball a little bit on that. When anytime you have 2 first-round picks, if you're going to take a reach, right about then would have been the time to reach and grab that other quarterback, just to make sure you had an eye on the future. Because in the grand scheme of things, Derek Carr's huge contract that he got a couple years ago is not really going to move the needle as far as quarterback contracts any longer. So you do have an out in the future as far as that goes, just in case Derek Carr doesn't get it done for you. But I really feel like the Raiders would have done themselves a nice service to go ahead and get a quarterback right then. But I understand what they were doing. They're basically giving Derek Carr every single opportunity to make this offense his own and make it work. We're going to give you all the tools that you need, and you need to make it happen. So I really feel like this is John Gruden telling Derek Carr, look, man, we're going to give you everything that you're going to possibly need to put as far as weapons around you, but now it's time for you to make it happen. So I think the Raiders did a good job with this draft. I really think that they put themselves in a good position. But Derek Carr, you're going to have to bring it. Otherwise, the Raiders are going to be looking for a quarterback in next year's draft. And my fourth and final team that I'm going to delve into as far as making quality picks, looking towards the future to make sure that they are filling all the necessary holes is, surprise, surprise, my Dallas Cowboys. Now, in the first round, the Dallas Cowboys had a lot of different places that they could have gone with that 17th pick, but at the end of the day, nobody in the world thought CeeDee Lamb was going to be available at number 17. CeeDee Lamb, hypothetically, was never supposed to reach number 17. So the Dallas Cowboys had no other choice but to take CeeDee Lamb at 17. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wide receiver was not number one on their list. They have Amari Cooper. They have Michael Gallup. Yes, Amari Cooper is signed. Michael Gallup is due to make some money in a couple years. And with the way that this salary cap is shaping out, with the way that we're going to have to pay Dak and the way that we just paid Zeke and the way that we just paid La'el Collins and the way that we just paid Jalen Smith and the way that we're eventually going to have to pay some more guys in the future like your Leighton Vander Esch's and things like that, this was a super smart thing for us to do. This gives us 3 wide receivers on the outside, 2 of which are now going to be locked up for the next 5 years. So that makes Michael Gallup someone in between that we can make a nice offer to, but we're not going to have to break the bank for in the future if he wants bigger money. But on the short end of the spectrum, as far as this draft pick goes, this just got incredibly scary for defensive coordinators. I mean, think about this. You already had 2,000-yard receivers in Cooper and Gallup last year. Last year, Cooper had 1,189 yards. Michael Gallup had 1,107 yards. When is the last time you saw the Dallas Cowboys have 2 wide receivers that reach 1,000 yards apiece? It's been a while. You add in the fact that you got Zeke in the backfield who ran for 1,357 yards, and that's almost 4,000 yards of combined offense right there just out of 3 guys. Now you add CeeDee Lamb? Now you add CeeDee Lamb to the slot? Listen, I'm no defensive coordinator, but I can tell you like this. That is going to be a long week for you, my friend, when you are trying to figure out just what defense am I going to call when I look up and I see Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and Zeke in the backfield. I mean, what do you even do? I mean, honestly, let's just see. I mean, if you call man, that leaves at least one of those wide receivers in one-on-one coverage, and that's barbecue chicken. If you go zone, that opens up the underneath routes for the slot guys like your CeeDee Lambs, or if you end up rolling all your coverage, now we got a tight end in Blake Jarwin who can actually stretch the field vertically. I mean, I'm really, really liking this Dallas Cowboys offense, man. This has potential to be 38 to 40 points per game easily. I'm talking 40 burgers all season long, but that's not all that they did in this draft that made it successful. I think the most important thing that the Cowboys did was that they stayed true to their board and they took the best possible player at each position that they could find in the subsequent rounds. In the second round, we ended up with Trayvon Diggs from Alabama. That's an amazing pick. That is a man-to-man guy who likes to play in the style that we are now going to be switching to. So that is a replacement for Byron Jones. Now we also still have Chido Awuzie, but that's an important pick because Chidobe Awuzie is going to be due some money soon. Jordan Lewis is also going to be due some money soon. So we're going to have some decisions to make in that defensive backfield. So that makes things a lot easier for us with that pick of Diggs in the second round. We also took another corner in the 4th round, Robinson from Tulsa. That boy can play, but the best part about him is that he's versatile. He can play multiple positions. He can play corner, and he can also play safety. So that gives us a little bit more wiggle room when you start talking about the contracts that are becoming up for Xavier Woods. And then another way that we also added to the depth is that 3rd round pick in Neville Gallimore from Oklahoma. Defensive tackle might not have been an immediate need with the fact that we just signed Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy this offseason, but at the same time, we needed someone in the middle who was going to be a log jam, someone who was really going to eat up those blockers so that we can actually allow these linebackers to do what they do best, which is run the field, see ball, hit ball. That's what these linebackers are made to do. They're not made to be taking on blocks. They're made to be running free. So that Neville Gallimore pick in the 3rd round was really, really good. Now, my star picks are actually going to be the ones that are later in the draft because I feel like they were just a couple hidden gems. Tyler Biadasz from the University of Wisconsin, center. Excellent pick. I am all for University of Wisconsin linemen. They have done nothing but perform well for us. They have a proven track record in the NFL of producing offensive linemen. Now, I am a University of Minnesota Golden Gopher, so we always say better dead than red, but Tyler Biadasz is a Cowboy now, so we're going to let that go. Also, my last star pick, which might end up being the steal of the draft, is defensive lineman from Utah, Bradley Anae. The man jumps off of cliffs and fights sharks, y'all. He's from Hawaii. He likes to fight sharks. I'm going to say that again. He likes to fight sharks. That means he is not afraid of any offensive tackle that you are going to put in front of him. I dare you to put a running back out there to try to block him. The man fights sharks. Bradley and I, consensus All-American, Pac-12 Defensive Lineman of the Year, 30 career sacks, has a motor that does not stop. And did I mention he fights sharks? Yeah. So, I think that you really have to tip your cap to the Dallas Cowboys front office with this one. I think Will McClay is probably one of the most unheralded GMs in all of the National Football League, simply because he does not have the title of general manager. But any real Cowboys fan or anyone who is really in tune with the Dallas Cowboys organization knows that over the last, I'd say, 8, 9, possibly 10 years, there's been a Will McClay steady influence in the draft, and they've just done nothing but hit on draft picks year after year after year. And I really think that the influence of Stephen Jones on this front office in the last couple years, as far as making these decisions on a contract level and making these decisions on a player personnel level, has really started to show that the Cowboys have an eye now, more so on the future, and making more prudent moves and not necessarily spending all the money just to make the splash. I think the Cowboys did an excellent job of sticking to their board, taking the best player available, and really putting themselves in position to compete in this NFC East, because it's only going to get more tough. Each team in the NFC East has gotten themselves a lot better throughout this draft, so I think it's going to be a nice little dogfight out there in the NFC East. So those are your 4 teams: the Packers, the Eagles, the Raiders, and the Cowboys. I really believe that all these teams did their due diligence in looking to the future. I think they all addressed spots of need. Whether outside fans thought that way or not, I think the front office made sure that they were going to be taken care of in those particular positions. So, thank you guys so much. We have come to the end of this second episode of the Rough Draft Sportscast. I want to thank you guys for making it to the end of this thing. Do not forget, you can follow me on Instagram at Rough Draft Sportscast. You can also follow me on Spotify by searching Rough Draft Sportscast. And you can also find me on the Podomatic app by searching Damon-Canady. That is Damon-Canady. Once again, thank you so much, guys, for making it to the end of this thing. This was the Rough Draft Sportscast. I'm your host, Damon Canady. Happy Memorial Day, guys. We'll see you on the next one.